I'm just going to give everyone some time to join the waiting room and be admitted in. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. So please just wait around, and I will say if you have any questions during the presentation, we will get to those at the end. Please leave them in the chat. There are some questions we won't be able to answer. This is not legal advice, but we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Hello, everyone. It's 12 o'clock now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Hiring Beyond Borders webinar. My name's Taryn. I'm here to do tech support and monitor the chat. So please leave any questions you have in the chat below. We'll do our best to answer all of them. We won't be able to answer them all. This isn't legal advice, but we'll do the best we can to answer them all. And with that, I will go ahead and toss it over to Anikka to get started.
Hello everyone and good afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about hiring individuals from what they call beyond borders. I like to sort of just basically describe it as Immigration 101. As Taram said, we will be answering any questions you may have, but we'd have to make it generic questions rather than individual specific questions to individuals or individual circumstances. So with that being said, we're going to look at two main categories of applications. In Canada and within Canadian immigration, we like to use a lot of acronyms. So as we go through the slides and we also go through the webinar, I will be describing these acronyms and explaining what each of them mean. But one thing to note is when we talk about temporary permits and permanent residence, temporary permits are for those individuals who are in Canada temporarily, and permanent residence is people who are allowed to remain in Canada permanently. So they're either permanent resident of Canada or a Canadian citizen, or an individual that is considered Indian as per the Indian Act in Canadian legislation. So when I refer to someone to say that they're Canadian, they'll be one of those three people. We're going to focus mainly on the temporary permits in this seminar to sort of go over what people are allowed to do in Canada. A lot of your employees will have temporary status, so this is we'll go through each type that they can have. The first type that we look at is business visitors. And I've listed here on this slide the type of acceptable business visitor activities that people can do. In Canada, we kind of use the analogy of if someone's coming to Canada and they're going to have their hands in their pockets and sit in the boardroom and have negotiations, that is considered a business visitor. If they are going to take their hands out of their pockets and they're going to start working on their laptop and coding for you or doing some software engineering for you, that can be considered work. So it's a little bit of a grey area. If you do have people coming in for that kind of work, just reach out to us and we can confirm whether or not they can enter as a business visitor or if they would need a work permit. Similarly, if you are in the manufacturing industry, if someone's coming in to, again, sit in a conference room, that would be considered a business visitor. If they are going to go down to the shop floor and help with, I don't know, with a machine that helps manufacture your products, that can be considered work again. So again, just reach out to us and we're happy to distinguish what it would be, and we can let you know if they can come in as a business visitor. The majority of this webinar also will be about temporary work permits, and a lot of you have individuals who are on temporary work permits. The traditional or golden standard is what they call the Labour Market Impact Assessment, or LIMA. The LMIA, sorry. There's a lot of people that do refer to it as LIMA, and actually I had a client earlier on today that did that, and I forgot that that's actually the capital of Peru rather than the LMIA. The process of the LMIA we will go into, but that is the gold standard. That is where the application has been assessed by Economic Service Development Canada, and the labour market has been assessed, and they have confirmed that no Canadian can do the job. There are some exceptions to the LMIA. One is the free trade agreements, and I'm going to go into each one of these. International Experience Canada, Postgraduate Work Permit, Bridging Open Work Permit, Reciprocal Benefit, and Significant Benefit. You can see this is why we use a lot of acronyms. Trying to say this over and over again every day kind of is wearing. So we will be using acronyms in and out of this presentation. But I do make it clear on all the slides what they are. These are not the only exceptions to LMIA. These are the ones that we normally encounter when we are assessing people who need work permits to come to Canada. These are sort of my go-to ones. There are other ones, but as I said, I don't think it's relevant in this forum. When I do assess an application, if one of you comes to me and says, oh, we need an employee to come from another country, I will look at all of the exceptions to the LMIA before I say, look, I'm sorry, the only way we can go forward is with the LMIA. So then if the LMIA is the traditional or gold standard, why wouldn't we use it? Well, while it is the gold standard, it does have its downsides. It is a two-step process. First, we have to go to Economic Service Development Canada, or ESDC, otherwise known as Service Canada, and we have to say to them, please look at this application, test the labour market, and show and give us a confirmation that that there is no one who is a Canadian citizen or permanent resident that can do this job. The processing times currently for ESDC is around about 41 to 45 business days for them to process one LMIA application. So you can already see that 6 weeks out. On top of that, prior to submitting the application, you also have to advertise the role for at least 4 weeks, which means that, again, you're now 10 weeks out. In addition to this, once it's been approved, we then have to go to Canada Immigration and say, we've got this approval from ESDC, now issue our potential employee abroad a visa and or a work permit to allow them to come into Canada and start work. And the processing times are various depending on where the individual's coming from. We also talk about that in a later slide. If the individual is what they call a visa mandatory country, we have to go through the embassy, and that adds anything up to another 40 weeks. So already we're looking at 6 months, 10 months before you can have this individual come into Canada. So I think we're all agreed that we'll try and look for a different way of doing this. So what is an LMIA exemption? An LMIA exemption is where we cut out the need for the LMIA and we go directly to Canada Immigration and we say, we are asking for an exemption for the LMIA because there are specific criteria for us to ask for the LMIA, and these are the criteria we're going to go through. The first exemption would be what they call the intra-company transfer. We also have an acronym for this called the ICT. The criteria for an ICT is that the individual must be coming into Canada as a manager, executive, or specialized knowledge worker. A manager is obviously someone in a management position. Executive is quite self-explanatory. Specialized knowledge worker is someone who's very unique. So we would have to justify that you need this individual from any other, from your entity abroad, and they are better than any other individual in that entity abroad because of X skills or X specialization. So we have to show that they go above and beyond even their own colleagues. In addition, this individual must have worked in an entity abroad for at least 1 year. What does it mean by entity abroad? It means it's an entity that's related to your company. That your company in Canada owns the entity abroad for at least 50 51%. The rationale is that you have to have control of that employee. You're going to manage their hours, you're going to manage the type of work that they're doing, the projects they're going to be working on, and you are managing their wages. The only way that Canada Immigration sees that you have control is if your company in Canada owns at least 51% of the entity in another country outside of Canada. The other important things are, one, it must be substantially the same position. So if you're transferring someone who is, for example, a software engineer from, let's say, the United Kingdom, you're transferring them from the United Kingdom and then you want them to be in HR. Well, that definitely isn't the same position as what they were doing. The whole point is that you're pulling them over from, in this case, the United Kingdom, because essentially you need them for a particular project or for a particular period of time in order to do the skills that they have to show that they are specialized. We have to show that they meet the wage floor. What does that mean? The wage floor means that they are being paid commensurate to their experience. For example, if you are bringing in a software engineer, you're not going to be paying them $17 an hour if we're trying to show that they are a specialized knowledge worker. We need to pay them substantially more than that. What the place that you would go to find out how much you need to pay this individual is a website called Job Bank Wages. Again, when you come to me asking if you can bring someone over under intercompany transfer, that's one of the things I look at. The thing that you need to know about most work permits is that they are initially valid for 3 years. As a manager and executive, they can get an extension for another 4-year maximum, so a maximum of 7 years. And for a specialized worker, they are extended for another 2 years for a maximum of 5 years. After the 5-year and 7-year maximum, respectively, they have to leave and go back to their country's citizenship for at least a year before they can come back under this intracompany transferee again. Okay. Then we're going to look at free trade agreements. Now, for some reason, free trade agreements, there are a number. These are trade agreements that Canada has with different countries. The most famous one is NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, which was reconfigured and renamed as CUSMA under Trump's first administration, which is the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. As the name sort of alludes to, it is only for citizens of Canada, United States, and Mexico to allow them to move within these 3 countries. It is not for permanent residents of these countries. So if someone's got a green card for the US, that means they can't benefit from NAFTA or CUSMA. They have to be a citizen, which means they have to hold the passport. The one thing you need to know about free trade agreements is that these trade agreements relate to specific occupations. It's not just everyone and anyone. Under NAFTA, they focus on professionals and technicians. So we're talking about lawyers, doctors, nurses, computer science. So any sort of software or hardware. We're also talking about professors and lecturers. And with technicians, they're looking at, for example, agriculturists, soil scientists, poultry specialists. So it's very specific to professional types. We also have Canada, Peru, Canada, Chile, Canada, Colombia, Panama, and Korea. Again, each trade agreement has different types of professionals and/or technicians that will be accepted in an exchange. We have CETA, which stands for Canada European Trade Agreement, which is available to anyone who's in the the European Union. So if you've got someone from Spain, for example, that wants to come to Canada and, you know, they are a software developer, we can apply for them under this trade agreement. And then up until the UK left under the famous Brexit, it was covered under CETA, but now we had to come up with a new term, which was the United Kingdom Canada Trade Agreement. This is not the easiest acronym to say, so we just refer to it as the UK CETA program. So what about other countries? So we've covered North America, we've covered some of Latin America, European. The CPTPP, which is also a mouthful to say, as you can see, stands for the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. So that covers Australians, it covers New Zealanders, it covers Japanese citizens, it covers also Mexican and some other nationalities that would actually be, which would be maybe beneficial for your company. And then if none of these apply and you say to me, Anikka, I really need this individual to come in and work, but they are not an Australian or a New Zealander, they are not from Chile, Panama, UK or Europe, we could look at what they call the General Agreement on Trade in Services. Now, this is open to any World Trade Organization members, which is the majority of the world. But again, this is very limited. This particular trade agreement is very limited to strictly business visitors and professionals, and also the duration. So as you can see, I've put here under GATS, or General Agreement on Trades and Services, the maximum the individual can be in Canada is 90 consecutive days within a 12-month period. That means they come in for 90 days, then they have to leave for the remainder of the year. With all the other ones that are listed here, we can apply for up to 3 years. GATS is the only one that's slightly different. So what if you have someone who you want to bring from a different country, but they don't have the experience that makes them relevant for a free trade agreement, and you don't want to go through the LMIA because it's too long? If they're young, they're a recent graduate, for example, we could look at what they call the International Experience Canada, or IEC. Under the IEC, there are 3 types of what they call work permits. One is a working holiday, which means it's open. It's available to anyone, and they can come to Canada and work in any capacity for any company. The reason why I highlight this is because they could come to work for your company, and if they don't like the pay that they're receiving, or they don't like any aspect of the work environment, they could go work for your competitor because it's an open work permit. The young professional is where they have recently graduated from university or college, and they've come to Canada and they are trying to build on their resume. So they don't necessarily have any professional work experience yet. But if you're in logistics, for example, you've got someone coming over to be a logistics clerk, and they are wanting to further their career. So we could look at that. The young professional is a work permit that is tied to your company. This means that if they get fed up and they don't want to work for you anymore, they've got no choice. They either have to leave Canada or they have to get another work permit in their own right. The last category in this subcategory, if you will, is the international co-op. This is where the individual is already registered in university and they're taking maybe a summer out, or they're taking a semester out, and they need to have a work experience as part of their education. So it might be that they come from say like June till December, and they are working for your company for that entire period of time. And then they're going to go back to their classes back in January, back home. So the requirement is that they're in the middle of their education. The international co-op is tied to your company. Again, if they don't like the conditions or the most freeing for an individual is the working holiday. I've listed here a number of countries and which countries can do which type of work permit. These are usually the ones that are coming to Canada, and I would look at this if you told me that you had an individual from, say, Chile coming to Canada to work with you. I would look at their ability to do this type of work permit. The thing that you need to know about IEC is that it is age limited. It's only for individuals between the ages of 18 and 30, and in some cases 35. So for Taiwan, Australia, European Union, usually it's 35. For most others, it's up to the age of 30. Okay. The next one we're going to look at is the postgraduate work permit. This has been bandied around a lot, and I know a lot of you are working with individuals who have a postgraduate work permit. We nicknamed it PGWP to make life a little easier. And this is where the individual has completed a post-secondary study at a recognized and authorized education facility in Canada. Usually the duration is for the same amount of time as how long they studied for, with the exception that if they studied for 2 years, they will get a 3-year work permit afterwards. The one thing you need to know is that it cannot be extended, that this is a once in a lifetime work permit. So once they've had their 3 years, that's it. A lot of consultants and lawyers who are not the most honest will say to their individuals, which is your employees, don't worry about it, we'll apply for another PGWP. That is not possible. 3 years is the maximum. The only time you can extend a PGWP is if the passport expires in that 3-year maximum. The reason I highlight this is, as I said, because a lot of consultants and lawyers are saying that it can be done, and it's bamboozling employers. And it does make me nervous for employers, especially when they get audited and they have to explain why did they keep hiring this individual when they are now aware that a PGWP is only valid for a maximum of 3 years. Another type of work permit that you may have encountered is called the Bridging Open Work Permit, or BOWP. Now, this is a work permit that's issued to individuals who have submitted an application, and when I say submitted, I mean the full application for permanent residency. Canada Immigration sort of said, well, we're really sorry it's taking us so long to process your permanent residence. Have a Bridging Open Work Permit while you wait. This allows the individual to work for any employer they want in any capacity they want. However, again, so that the employer is not bamboozled in all of this, what you need to know is it means that the individual has been invited to apply for permanent residence and then submitted all of their documents, so all of their resumes, their education credentials, their police clearances, their medical, everything's been submitted. And that's the only reason why they have been given the option for a Bridging Open Work Permit. Usually it's for people who have applied for express entry or under the provincial nomination programs or under the temporary residency to permanent residency pathways. The purpose of this presentation is not to go into the permanent residency one, and I'll actually talk to Taryn about maybe doing another presentation about permanent residency, because that will take up a good chunk of time as well. So I don't want to sort of go down that rabbit hole in this presentation. But when you are presented or told by an employee that, you know, they have a bridging open work permit, you do need to sort of probe a little bit further and say, oh, well, I understand then you've applied for express entry, is that correct? You can't probe too much because obviously you don't want to breach any HR policies, but you could have a conversation with the individual. The next one is what we call a reciprocal benefit. Now, this is where the employer must have a global mobility in place. We need to show that you are a multinational company and that you are that you have a global mobility policy in place, or GMP, and essentially it allows Canadians to go abroad as much as it allows the individuals from abroad to come into Canada. I've done numerous GMPs, so if you're sitting there thinking, Anikka, I don't know where to go with this GMP, I'm happy to help. I've done this a lot, and basically we just have to show that there is opportunity for Canadians to go abroad. I've done this for graduates. I have done this for individuals that are at the managerial or executive level. So while we're bringing these people in, they can't be the person in the mailroom, but at the same time, they have to be someone who is skilled or managerial or executive. I've done this many times, so I can help out. The last one is significant benefit. Significant benefit for me is the very last it's the last chance salon, so to speak. I don't like to use this unless we have no other choice. If you say to me, Anikka, I need someone in Canada in 5 weeks, well, obviously that cuts out the LMIA. And you say to me, Anikka, we don't have an entity abroad. Well, okay, so that cuts out intercompany transfer. And they are not from a country that allows for international experience class. I would then consider a significant benefit. It's a 50-50 chance. We have to convince the officer that's reviewing the application that, one, not only is this individual going to benefit your company, it is going to benefit Canada as a whole. So how do we do that? If we can show how this individual coming into Canada is going to benefit your company, for example, if they are a logistics manager and they're coming into Canada, and by having this person come in as a logistics manager, it's going to create jobs. We can then show it's benefiting Canada because these new jobs are going to go to Canadians. Or perhaps it would, if it's a manufacturing individual coming into Canada, would increase the number of products that your company can get out, which would attract more taxes, which means that that's the tax revenue that goes into Canada. We literally have to get down to that nitty-gritty and go down that rabbit hole to show that in hiring this person, there is exceptional grounds to hire this person, and that we're going to have a lot of benefits, not just for the company, but for Canada as a whole. Okay. So then I alluded to this earlier about timelines. So a lot of times I get asked by employers, well, how long will it take to get this person into Canada? We've got a strategy. We know what type of work permit we're going to do. How long will it take them to get the work permit? Well, there are two options of getting a work permit. One is a port of entry. We call it a POE. This is only for what they call non-visa nationals. What are non-visa nationals? They are citizens that don't need to have a visa stuck in their passport to be able to come to Canada. So we're talking predominantly the majority of the European Union, we're talking US, we're talking some of Latin America, we're talking Australia, New Zealand, some of Asia. So for example, Japanese citizens don't need visas. It's a quick method of getting a work permit. So it's not just that they turn up at the border and say, hey, I'm going to work. We have to prepare a port of entry package. So if you come to me and say, Anikka, I need this person in, I need them in 3 weeks, and I need to get them a work permit under this strategy, I would prepare a documentation, and this individual has to print it out. And sometimes it comes like this with, 40, 50, 60 pages. I've actually done one where it was 168 pages printed out. And they present that with their passport at the border, and then the border officer makes a decision there and then. Because it is LMIA exempt, they can make that application at the border. The officer will take their fingerprints, their photographs, ask them to pay for the $155 for the work permit. Then the work permit's issued and off they go. They have their work permit, they're ready to work for you the next day. This is why it's attractive. I will give you the warning that we in the lawyer industry, the immigration lawyer industry, do prefer that you have your individuals come in via the airport. Land borders, because they are more worried about contraband items, whether it be someone bringing a whole load of furniture that might have asbestos or something in it, they're more worried about that. But that means when they see an application with for a work permit, they really scrutinize it, and they will pick it apart, and they will ask you ask the individual all sorts of questions. I've known individuals to sit at a land border for up to nearly 12 hours because the officer is so used to dealing with items and contraband rather than actual individuals coming across and asking for a work permit. Airports, especially places like Toronto Pearson, they do work permits all day, every day. In fact, it's a 24-hour operation. They know what they're talking about. They understand when we say we're asking for a significant benefit or we're asking for a bridging up and work permit, whatever it is we're asking for. We do have a list of notoriously difficult port of entries. Detroit, Windsor, they really scrutinize applications. Calgary, Edmonton, and Montreal. Montreal mainly because people will transit there, and what they're worried about in Quebec is that they're going to get the work permit and then stay in Quebec rather than going on to, for example, BC or Ontario or Alberta. If the individual is a visa requiring national or a visa national, and we're talking most of Africa, majority of Asia, Russia, a little bit of the Eastern Bloc of Europe, and some of Latin America, then we have to go via the embassy. There's no ability for them to go via the port of entry. So you'd come to me and say, oh, we need this person coming in. I would file the application and it would go to the Canadian embassy or consulate or high commission in the country that the individual is currently in. They will then make a decision on the application. If it is approved, the individual will get a visa stuck in their passport, and it's called a temporary resident visa. And that will allow them to fly into Canada to the port of entry, where the officer does their biometrics, their fingerprints, their photographs, and issues a work permit at the airport. But they still need that TRV. That TRV has a lot of information in it. It tells the officer at the airport, everything's been cleared, they are approved for a work permit, please issue the work permit at the border. Processing times, and I've put this here and it is a little bit shocking, can be 2 weeks to up to 3 years. Currently, a visitor visa for someone in South Africa is at 400 and something days, and that's only for a visitor visa, let alone a work permit. So the reason I put that here is to manage expectations. Again, if you say to me, I need someone here tomorrow, well, I'm going to say to you, unfortunately, we're going to have to manage your expectations and tell you it's going to take you this long. The next thing I want to sort of talk about, and it kind of rounds out why we've discussed all these different types of work permits, is compliance. I actually did a presentation last week on compliance in far more detail, and I know some of you that are attending today attended that conference. So I'm just going to go over it at a lighter level, but it is to say that compliance, we do know with everything going on currently with immigration, they are trying to convert the people that are currently in Canada on a temporary basis. They're trying to convert them into permanent. But in order to do so, they need to do more enforcement visits. So we believe that they're going to be doing more and more enforcement visits and enforcement audits. So a lot of the times, the funding from this comes from the compliance fees. So when you apply for an LMIA, there is a $1,000 filing fee that the employer has to pay and cannot recoup from the employee. Similarly, if it's an LMIA exemption, there is a fee of $230 that the employer must pay and cannot recoup from the employee. All of this money is going to investigation teams within Canada Immigration and Service Canada, and that's what's funding all of these enforcement compliance audits. So another funding source that they're getting is more penalties. So if you are found to be employing someone who does not have status or the right authorization to work for you or for the role, they will issue a fine. And these fines can go up to 100,000, even sometimes more. And there will be a ban for your company to hire temporary workers. The other thing that happens is there's a public listing of all banned employers. And I've nicknamed it name and shame, because it's not the best marketing tool for you and your company. But on top of that, it will also list the transgression that's happened. So the fact that you've hired someone illegally and you were fined X amount, and that you have been banned from hiring temporary workers for X amount of time, anything up to 5 years. And that's not good advertising, especially if you're trying to attract people who are skilled, people who have the knowledge and the experience that you need. Circumstances for inspection. Again, I went through this on my last presentation, but essentially it is known non-compliance. So if you've had a little bit of an issue before where an employee was really upset and decided to write a poison pen letter to ESDC or to immigration saying this employer is terrible, I really don't like them, they did this to me, they did that to me, that could trigger an audit. In respect to random selection, anytime you hire a foreign employee, you have to, anytime you hire an employee, you have to put their SIN number into your HR system or whatever it is that you use, and it obviously generates T4 at the end of the year. That triggers to Service Canada and ESDC that you've hired foreign employees. So it could be that your name goes into a database of known people that hire foreign employees, so they make a random selection. It can be one that the first 8 employers, we're gonna do an inspection on them. So there's no rhyme or reason. And the last one is reasons to suspect. Is it because, given the fact that you're an office that only works 9 to 5, why is there 150 cars in your car park and there's a whole flurry of activity going on after 5 p.m? So there's lots of reasons why they would suspect you, or lots of reasons why they would inspect you rather, and none of them is for any fault of yours, but they have the right to inspect. So what do we recommend? We recommend that you run your HR systems and pull all social insurance numbers beginning with 9. Anyone who has a social insurance number beginning with 9, you create a digital folder or a physical folder, and in that folder you need to have their current work permit, a copy of their passport, and any supporting documents. Why do you need a copy of their passport? Well, if I take Taryn as an example, I could be working for KSW saying, oh yes, I'm Taryn, here's my work permit because I've stolen her work permit. Well, unless they see my photo ID to prove that I am Taryn, the employer is not considered to have done enough due diligence to ensure that they are hiring people who are legitimately allowed to work in Canada. So that's why I say you need to have a copy of their passport. You don't need every page, you just need the photo page to show that they are who they say they are, and that name matches the work permit number or the work permit copy. Additional supporting documentation is things like, for example, if their work permit's about to expire and they've applied for an extension because you've helped them apply for an extension as an employer supporting their extension, then they would get a letter from Canada Immigration upon submitting their application saying, thank you, we've received your application prior to the expiry of your current work permit, therefore we are allowing you to continue working until a decision is made. They will get that letter. You need to have a copy of that letter if their current work permit has expired. If they don't have a copy of that letter, then you have the grounds, in my view, to start asking more questions. Well, what's going on? Did you not apply for an extension? If so, what's happening with it, etc., etc. Obviously, be mindful of employment standards, but by all means, start asking a few more questions. I'm happy for you to come to me and ask me what you can ask and what you can't. And I'm happy for you to come to me and ask what type of documents you should be looking for. And I can give you examples. The last thing on compliance is prepare bring forwards. In the legal industry, we call them bring forwards, which is like reminders. So when you know someone has a work permit, it's a limited time they have in Canada. So at 6 months prior to their work permit expiring, you set a reminder. Are they a good employee? Do you want to keep them on? Because if they are, and you want to keep them on beyond their current work permit, that's a time you need to speak to me to say, hey, Anikka, we want to keep this person on. They're amazing. What options do we have? And I'll go through the options. If you decide, no, I'm happy for them to go, we can find a replacement, it also gives you the opportunity to start advertising for that replacement rather than it being a last minute scramble. At 3 months, that's when you know, okay, this person needs to start packing up, they need to start winding down any projects that they're working on or start transferring their projects. And then at the 1 month mark, you start to know that you've got to issue them the record of employment. You know that they have to start clearing out their locker or their desk or whatever it is. And then The final day of their work permit is when you approach them in the office and say, I understand this is your last day. Thank you very much for your service. Here's your record of employment if you're going to issue it that day. Here's a gift to say thank you, we love you so much and we wish you could stay, whatever the case may be. And you make sure that they've given in any passes or keys that they have to the property, because that literally is the last day that they can work in Canada. Okay, so that commences the presentation, and I know we've got a lot of questions here. So one of the questions here is, hi Anikka, what PR pathways now for PGWP holders in not high priority jobs, especially in British Columbia? It depends honestly on the work experience that they've had. Again, I can't answer specifically for each question or individual, but for example, I understand you're asking about not high priority, but we could look at an LMIA to keep them in Canada. We could look at, depending on the job role, depending on the company, we could look at significant benefit, reciprocal benefit. If there is there's entities abroad. Again, it's too broad of a question for me to answer specifically, but I'm happy to discuss this offline. Where do we find the list of banned employees? Could I get a link? Taryn, I had a link on my previous presentation. Would it be possible for you to pull that up? And then I can show you the link.
Yes, absolutely. I'll send that in the chat.
Thank you. How has processing time changed since new legislation? Yes, it has. Has the standard estimated processing time changed in recent days? Yes, is the answer to that. There's a couple of factors that have been going on. One is that Canada Immigration have not helpfully made redundant 3,300 immigration officers. So that causes an impact. On top of that, there's now a sort of movement to have government officers come back to the office, and a lot are reluctant to do so. So there's a lot of sort of in-house squabbling. However, hopefully things will catch up. I mean, as I said, a visitor visa from South Africa right now is taking 400 days, which is more than a year. But I have seen it drop down to like 4 weeks. So it sways backwards and forwards. I'm hoping that this is the worst that we've seen and it will only get better, but we can't guarantee it. Normally it does get better, but we can't guarantee it. Hi, Anikka. If we have an interest in an individual who is on an IEC and we want to hire them as an employee, can we extend the IEC? Do we need to proceed with an LMIA? The individual is on an entry-level labour position, which would be difficult to justify not taking a job away from Canadian. Okay, so a couple of things going on here. One is, again, I don't mean to be vague, but it does depend on the country that they're coming from. Australia, for example, is allowed 2 bites at the cherry for an IEC. Someone from Ireland is also able to do that. Someone from the UK, no, they're not allowed to do it twice. So it depends on where they're from. Second of all, with an LMIA, it doesn't necessarily mean entry-level labour position is not viable. With an LMIA, we just have to show that no Canadians are willing to do the job. For example, there's a lot of Canadians who, for example, if we take the position of, I'm trying to think now, maybe a bar manager. A lot of Canadians will not get out of bed for less than $50 an hour, maybe. Well, if we've advertised it at what we call the wage floor, which is the minimum, according to Job Bank, which I think is about $34 an hour. If we advertise it and no Canadian is applying for it, that is sufficient to say to Service Canada, look, we advertised it. We advertised it across the whole of Canada. No one who is a Canadian citizen or permanent resident wants to come and do the bar manager job because we had no applications. Here's the proof. They will take that into consideration. And it doesn't matter which level it's at. There is the other factor that is at play here is that there's something called the low wage LMIA. So if it's below a certain amount of money per hour, it will define whether it's a low wage LMIA or a high wage LMIA. And right now, Canada Immigration or other ESDC are not processing applications for a low wage LMIA if that region or that city or that area has more than a 6% unemployment rate. Again, that's something I look at when you come to me and ask me. So the person that asked me this question, I'm happy to look into this, but we'd have to look at a lot more factors before I can give you a definitive answer. And then I see that Taryn has provided the non-compliant employers list there. Is the BC PNP International Graduate Programme open? No. Currently, BC is only really doing people that have a job offer or entrepreneurs. As the CRS points continue to remain around 530, is the PNP the best resort for residency? Again, this is a very specific question, and I'd like to answer that offline because it depends on the individual's particular circumstances. Stacey, hi Anikka, could you please speak more about how employers can protect themselves when they receive a copy of IRCC letter to extend a 3-year postgraduate work permit? So I think the question on that, if I understand this correctly, is if the person has presented a 3-year postgraduate work permit and you can see that they've had 3 years, and then they have provided a letter to show that they've submitted another application, then I think the best way to proceed is for the employer to go to that individual and say, please, can we have a frank discussion? Can we ask what is the basis of this extension? Is it an extension of the postgraduate work permit, or is it that there's another category that has been applied for? I think the employer has a right to know, because if it is an employer-sponsored application, you haven't filled out any forms, you know that there's something wrong. If it is that, you know, for example, maybe they're converting their postgraduate work permit, maybe they're eligible for the international experience class, the working holiday. So maybe that's what they've applied for. I think that's where you need to go. You need to start asking questions on the basis of how have they got this, or how have they applied for an extension. Okay, we've been waiting over 2 months now for a decision on an LMIA application. It's suggested about 45 days. Does this indicate there's an issue, or is it okay that they're taking longer? So bear in mind, it's 41 to 45 business days. We've had Thanksgiving, we had Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is counted as public holidays. So we have to add that into the equation of 2 months. You said over 2 months. So again, depends how far over 2 months it has been. Here's your bar manager example in BC. That's a really good question. I love the fact that you've actually copied and pasted it, because this is a really good example. Does this mean that we would need to advertise at 27.69 or 18, for example? Okay, so when you look at the job bank wages for the wage floor, you will notice on the left-hand side, it lists all the cities and the provinces and everywhere else. So you find the one that's closest to you. And then you'll notice that there are 3 lines. One is what they call the low wage. The second one is the medium. And then the final one is the high wage. So low wage is when someone has literally come out of university and is still training. Medium is what they call the wage floor. That's the one that they focus on. So it would be $27.69. High wage is someone who's been doing it for many years. So if we use another example rather than bar manager, we use an example of a software engineer. Software engineer being paid $18 is someone that maybe just graduated last week. Medium is someone who's been around for a couple of years. And then someone who's at the high wage would be probably been doing it for at least 15, 20 years. But the wage floor for the context of immigration is always the median row, the middle row. So to answer your question, it would be $27.69. And then I think we've got a final question here is there a grace period on receiving documents from an employee? For example, they've extended their permit but have not sent the letter to us. Do we have to let them go on the expiry date, or do we have a window in which we can keep them in hopes of getting a letter before we're non-compliant? Very good question. Usually when you apply for an extension, you get the letter confirming that you have filed the application and that you're entitled to continue working. Usually you get that within 48 hours, unless IRCC or Canada Immigration have got a glitch with their system. But I would say a maximum of 1 or 2 business days. Then you need to say, look, where is it? Sometimes individuals, employees, will have worked through a consultant or a lawyer, and they say, oh, I've asked my consultant, my lawyer for this document. They're not giving it to me. They're not getting back to me. You have to say to the employee, look, you need to put a bit of pressure on this. We need this document. So the maximum I would give them is probably a working week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. By the Friday, if they haven't given it to you, you say, look, I need to understand why you've not given this to me, because this puts us in a very difficult position in case we are audited. I do need this document. I would defer to my employment law colleagues who would be able to advise you what you can do after that in respect to what action you can take after 5 days if they have not provided that document to you. I would recommend you reach out to us, and we can give you the exact sort of process map for it, depending on the particular situations. If it is someone who's stuck and can't get it from their immigration lawyer or consultant, then maybe there's a couple of alternatives, but it is very specific to the individual situation. Do we have any other questions? I don't think so. I'm just having a look. Taryn, we don't have any other questions, do we?
We had a question or two via email. I don't know if you want to answer them really quick. The first one was, who do we apply to for the LMIA?
It would be Economic Service Development Canada, otherwise known as Service Canada.
Great. And the second one was, under reciprocal benefit, what kind of things do you need in the global mobility policy?
You need to show, one, the global mobility policy. If you've had it for a while, how long you've had it for, what are the requirements? Is it that they had to have worked for the company for at least a year, or maybe they had to work for at least 2 years? They have to be of a certain position. Don't forget, for reciprocal, they have to be skilled, managerial, or executive. Is it available only to people of a certain age? Is it only available to people For example, if the entity abroad is only in United Kingdom, then it might be that they need to be a citizen of the United Kingdom, or you can have whatever you like in there, obviously within reasons. You can't specify it down to only one person be eligible for it, because don't forget, it also has to be that Canadians can go to the UK. So you'd have to talk to your UK counterpart to say, hey, while we're going to bring some people over from the UK, are you okay? Can you accommodate in your office Canadians coming to the UK, for example? Sorry, there's one more that's just popped into the chat. Following up on my question about 3-year postgraduate work permit, what actions do we take if the employee states it's a postgraduate work permit renewal and their lawyer is handling the process? So I presume, for the person that wrote this, I presume that you've got a copy of their postgraduate work permit and they've already had their 3 years. So there was a period of time where, because of COVID, people could extend it, but that period of time has closed. And I don't think they would be in this position if that is the case. I would say that this lawyer is trying to buy them time, because technically, now that the application has been filed, they are what's considered implied status, which means they're entitled to work and continue in the same way as the work permit that's expired up until a decision on the new one has been made. If they've had their full 3 years and they filed for another one, it's likely they're going to be refused. And currently, I'm just going to double check this, the processing times for the application process. Essentially, if it's going to be refused, you need to make sure that you're on top of that. The current processing times for a work permit in Canada to be extended is, I believe it's like 200 and something days. I'm just confirming that. It's 229 days. So that is approximately 6 months or so. So I would follow up with them. If they've given you the letter, sorry, we've just got Karen. Can you see the note from someone? I'm not hearing it. Okay, perfect. If you've got someone who has applied for the extension, I presume you have a copy of that extension letter. I would follow up in 4 months from the date that that extension letter was dated. And then I would follow up every single month. They're going to get a refusal probably around the 6th month mark. And as soon as they get that refusal, they are no longer entitled to work in Canada. Any final questions before we wrap up? Okay, I don't see any other questions. I know there's a lot of chatter about the audio, but I don't see any other questions. Taryn, do you have any more email questions?
The 2 were the only ones we got. So I believe that's all of our questions.
Okay, perfect.
So thank you all so much for attending our webinar today. It was lovely to have you all here and to get all of your questions. As mentioned in the chat, I will be sending out a follow-up email with a recording of the event and the slides, just in case anyone wants to go over those again. So thanks again for spending your afternoon with us.
Thank you very much, everyone.